was a lovely song from my friend Adriana's family from Brazil from a few shows ago. I figured that would be a nice opening for tonight. And welcome to the Conant Show. And I'd like to thank Paula Gloria Barton for engineering our shows, and she's doing another fantastic job tonight. So thank you, Paula. And I'd like to also thank the facility here at Woodstock Public Access TV, WATV. And this evening, I have a longtime friend in Woodstock here, my friend John Conant. And we've had many, many engaging conversations over the years, from local situations, politics, spirituality, and extraordinarily strange phenomena, our work, our various fields of expertise. And John, if you'd like to just introduce yourself to our audience and maybe share a little bit about yourself, and we'll let the roll.
Okay. Previous to coming here in '04, I lived in Boston, and I did psychiatric social work or that type of thing. But I've had a keen interest in metaphysics and such for most of my life. In my mid-20s, I raised my kundalini, had out-of-body experiences, channeled different types of things. It's been like an ongoing study my whole life, and I'm still learning stuff every single day. I'm 67, and in my 60s has been very productive because I've been able to weave together things that I spent my whole life working on. So I find life intensely fascinating and new things coming up all the time. And when I speak with George, we always come up with something really incredible. There's a number of different issues that could come up. I recently came across some aspects of transhumanism, which is some technological interface with the human body, where there's some control aspects involved, especially with respect to nanotechnology. I most recently came across an article, it was on the internet, that they could inject billions of nanoparticles into the brain and then have them programmed so that they would respond to a machine outside of the brain. So you essentially would be mechanizing people with machines or any manner of things. Those people who are familiar with Star Trek and the Borg, this is sort of like the Borg with a passion. And generally speaking, from what I've been able to ascertain, when they share on the internet or whatever that they're doing something, generally they've been working on it for over 20, 25 years before they show the general public. So for people to be aware that there are different avenues that are happening right now that have a big impact on their lives. But that's one thing that I've encountered lately.
All right. There's an electric piano maker by the name of Kurzweil, and Mr. Kurzweil is a leading proponent, I guess, of transhumanism.
Yes.
And the articles that I've been reading on his philosophy is that human beings are quickly destroying their home environment on the earth, and that we as a biological species are doomed
Yes.
and inferior to human consciousness being uploaded, downloaded into artificial brains and bodies. Kind of, the famous movie Blade Runner, where you had the replicants, which were humans that had been manufactured, and they were so close to living organic beings, though they were still machines, that they had arrived to consciousness, self-consciousness, and had developed a sense of self-preservation, which is of course, one of the signs of life. So the transhumanism that I've kind of encountered is more along the lines of literally replacing humans with some form of robotics, and that for those of us that are wealthy enough, we can exceed death by downloading or uploading, however you want to phrase this, our soul and spiritual and intellectual consciousness into these devices, these machines.
Right, and going along with that of downloading our consciousness into machines, there's one theory that there was a civilization that was very successful at making very elaborate machines, and they ended up trapping themselves because they were encasing their souls in these artificial bodies that trapped a part of their genetic code or their genetic heritage. So they sort of like manacled themselves because they got stuck on their own technology. That there's a creative aspect that our genes have that a lot of machines don't have, and that one of the agendas of the transhumanism is to create partial humans, bodies that are more limited than the ones that we have, so that we are easier to control. That our current genetic makeup has too much capacity for creativity and too much capacity to be free. So they sort of have to miniaturize who we can be. So they will generate an artificial self, an artificial body that is more limited than the one we have right now. So they teach us that humans are no good and they're bad and they're awful. And I hear people all on the street say that, but that was part of the program.
Yeah.
Meaning that we accept that we're garbage, so we should be better, so we will accept whatever nonsense they put in front of us, rather than cherishing the wonderful capacities we do have and to take them to the next level.
Yeah, this reminds me of some of the conversations we've had about, say, for example, both Johnny and I were raised Roman Catholic, and the tradition of Catholic guilt as a power tool on your consciousness, as a control mechanism, a power tool to keep you afraid of God, where, I can't speak for you, John, but I would, in my experience in Catholic school, which was not all bad, some of it was good, and I have to credit Sister Celestine, bless her soul. Sister Celestine was my third grade. I'm going to tell this little story about Sister Celestine, and this is such a wonderful thing, because she took 51 kids,
wow,
third graders, and commanded their attention for probably a solid hour and a half.
Yes.
And I remember this, and so does some. Through Facebook is great. A few of my friends on Facebook, remember Sister Celestine.
Yes.
And what she did this particular day. And what she did was she was probably 95 years old and sort of waddled into the classroom every morning and was very frail, and that in itself kind of kept us third graders in line, because it was just so awesome to have such an old person as our educator. So she comes in and she goes, "Today, class, we're going to do something different. I want everybody to put their hands together on the front of their desk and sit with your back straight." So everybody did what she said, and then she goes and launches into this fabulous dissertation on how people mustn't take the Bible literally.
Wow.
She's saying this to third graders, mind you.
Wow.
And we're all spellbound, because I kid you not, this fabulous elder was glowing blue. She had this fabulous blue aura as she was speaking her truth.
Oh, wow, the real deal.
And she had touched upon so many deep thoughts that day. And she first got into this idea that you have to study the Bible, but you have to be critical in your thinking about it.
Yes.
Because of the limitations of the language and translations and so on through the years.
Right.
And then she goes on about the nature of God. And she goes, God isn't some guy in the clouds.
Okay.
We don't know what God is. And
Nice.
but what we do know is something really smart made all this.
Yeah.
And that it exists in everything.
Yeah, it's underneath
Now, I'm going to touch
everything.
on to this again later in our conversation, okay? And then she moved on onto the
Yes.
nature of the soul.
Wow.
And then she goes, she says, children, you have a soul, and your soul is this part of you that records everything you do. And she said that your soul is much like your physical body in that it has a health. So you have to, be careful with your physical body, or responsible with your physical by feeding it good food and exercising and doing, bathing and such. But your soul has a condition too,
Yes.
and that is when your soul is impacted by, say, lies or wrongdoing, sin, if you will. It gets a little blemish. It gets a sickness. And the more you engage in self-destruction and lies and wrongdoing,
Yes.
that illness perforates more parts of the soul, and eventually your soul gets very ill and damaged, and then you have a person who is physically manifesting this illness through bad behaviors and self-destructive or destructive or harmful behaviors to others and this kind of thing, and psychosis and all of these other
Right.
things. Now, she didn't use the words like psychosis, which would be beyond our,
Right. Yeah.
but she communicated
yeah,
this
right.
in language that
That
really
made sense.
not only made sense, but we're talking 51 kids, third graders, absolutely spellbound
Wonderful.
for a solid hour plus.
Fantastic.
And I say that all of those kids that had that experience with her are better people for it.
Absolutely.
That group of kids, as the years go by, you get separated into other schools, other
Sure.
classes and such.
Right.
But as I encountered them from that, they were all deep thinkers, critical thinkers,
Yes.
and very kind and loving and good, solid people.
Right.
So I just had to put that out about Sister Celestine, as she really impacted a group of people in such a positive way. Now, a lot of other aspects of Catholic school, I can
But
complain about.
I think that Sister Celestine was communicating something that is from an older tradition, which is Gnostic. She was, in a general way, meaning she was talking not about the blood of the Lamb and all the rest of that stuff. She was talking about personal responsibility and engaging with life as it comes. And some of the nuns actually outgrew the dogma, and they tried to find ways of communicating it to the kids. So she couldn't directly say something anti-Catholic, but she found a way of getting around it. And her best way of doing that was what she did, meaning she was giving permission for the entire class to think, and she was giving permission for the entire class to be self-responsible.
Yeah.
And in Catholicism, it was more of a confidence racket, where you have original sin, so you're screwed from day one, and then the blood of the Lamb, right? So you have somebody that's tacked up on a cross, and somehow that's supposed to make it better. I did a little bit of study where they had Jesus and Barabbas, and it was actually the original text was Barabbas Jesus. So basically, this was a story where you had two scapegoats.
Yeah.
Which is an old Jewish story, and this metaphor turned into a literal Jesus. But basically, what you had was scapegoating, and scapegoating is a form of savagery, because you are projecting your problem on someone else, making it worse. And if you take scapegoating farther enough, you have lynch mobs, or in taking it even further, when we attacked Iraq, we had 3 buildings knocked down, so we lynched another country.
Yeah.
This country had nothing to do with us. So your belief system and how you're used to thinking, meaning, the Lamb of the God, and we're going to be it predisposes your thinking in a negative direction. Because when you're sacrificing, what are you sacrificing to? It doesn't make any sense. All right? But people, when they're thinking in this direction, and I'm going somewhere with this, the American people essentially became psychopaths because they killed tens of thousands of Iraqis for no earthly reason, and they didn't feel badly about it. And all that you hear in the news is, we're so traumatized because those people died in 9/11 and blah, blah, blah. Well, how about the tens of thousands of people that were wiped out in Iraq? How about all of the children that were killed? Well, what about all of the annihilation that occurred? Well, they don't count. Really? So what's amazing is one's belief system from the micro goes to the macro, so that America has a long history of lynch mobs. It's not new here. Then when the politicians use that way, the scapegoat, and then they projected it on Iraq, and they killed tens of thousands of people. I wrote
I think it's millions now.
Millions. And
I know it's certainly
I
hundreds
wrote
of
a poem.
thousands.
I wrote a poem called "Tears of 9/11," and basically the core of the poem was that the people who died in 9/11, meaning the innocent people in the buildings, were crying for all the crimes that were done in their name. And that when they went to the other side, the Iraqi people came to their souls and said, we don't blame you for what all those people did to us.
Right. Wow.
So there was a forgiveness on the other side. People did not want to hear that poem. They just shut it out.
Yeah.
Because it just destroyed the paradigm. Meaning, we had a lynching and we felt really good about it. And you say, well, John, how can you call that a lynching? You have an innocent party that is grabbed. You use a powerful military to have your way with them. The only country in the entire world that had weapons inspectors was Iraq. So that should have been the last country that you would attack for weapons of mass destruction, because you already had weapons inspectors there.
Well, there were none there.
But even if there was, and there wasn't, I'm saying you already had inspectors on the ground. Meaning even on that level, you still already had inspectors there. Meaning you could have put 10 times as many there. You could have put 20 times as many. So you didn't have to bomb all of that. But everyone was comfortable with a lynch mob mentality. When we have this powerful, we're feeling helpless. People are bossing us around. They're not respecting America. We'll show them, and bang, that's what happened.
Yeah, well, the motivation, I'm quoting my father, who was a very high-level officer in the U.S. military for 35 years. He saw action in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Yes.
And one of the axioms that he would put out there when he was angry, usually at the news, because he said it was all phony.
Yes.
He said that all wars are engineered. All wars are economic.
Yes.
He says the politicians and the heads of state and all the saber rattling is all to convince us that it's real.
Yes.
But at a certain level, the powers that be, sorry about that, the powers that be, the elite, the 1%, the Illuminati, there's all kinds of words they have for them, but basically the power players on the planet.
Yes.
I think my father once called them the club. Another word I think I heard him say was the world management team.
Right.
Okay,
George,
that's
a good one.
That's how they kind of
team.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's how they look upon themselves, and that war had a multiple of functions. One of them was population control. This is my father talking. This is not, this is dear old dad, the colonel.
Sure.
Saying that the reason that they took him back down to colonel from general, because he was a battlefield general, at least that's what he told me, in World War II, which was common, as a battlefield commander.
Yes.
But he had two big strikes against him. One, he wasn't a West Point pencil pusher.
Okay.
And the other was he wasn't a yes man for the oil companies.
Whoa. Well, that's not going to work.
he was the
politically.
real deal warrior, and he was
Sure.
fighting the real fight, leading his men on the battlefield.
Right.
And one of his claims, I guess, to fame, if you will, is that at the peak of his command, he had 250,000 in his command.
Wow.
250,000 army.
That's amazing.
250,000 man army was
That is-
loyal to my father, because he was famous among his troops for he would not send a private into anything he wouldn't go into first.
Wow.
So he led the guys onto the beaches at Normandy. He
Wow.
led them out
Amazing.
of the foxholes where they were getting pounded by the German fire.
Yes.
He was the liberating commander at Dachau,
Wow.
and many other credits to his career.
Yes.
But the reason I bring him up is that, you know, he pre-internet conspiracy theory stuff.
Sure.
You know, as a little kid, I'm hearing about how there is this above the law community
Right.
that uses a variety of social engineering tools, including the military, to do what it wants. So you have mining the planet wherever they want, so you
Yeah.
create a good war, and you get
Yes.
chaos going in there, and then you
And
start
then-
extracting the minerals.
Right.
And then the other is, you know, this is kind of a coarse thing to say. Y'all might not like to hear this, but it's just to get rid of the too many humans, because when you have too many humans getting smart, that 1%, that elite, they get worried. You might have a French Revolution where, you know, royalty heads start rolling, you know?
Yes.
So that I think is part of the concern the powers that be, or that power control paradigm structure has today,
Yes.
is that all of this technology that's now available in the palm of your hand.
Yes.
And this is something that, for my generation and older, we're really confronted with technological thrust. Alvin Toffler, future shock. This is future shock. You know, I'm 56 years old, and I can barely keep up with my computer updates because I have to learn all the new little things to do just to put an email out or whatever it is. And now you have devices that fit in your hand that are more powerful than my, you know, terabyte computer. There's now, you know, iPhones and Galaxy phones that are more powerful than a very advanced computer I just got 2 years ago. And this is part of that transhumanism. Eventually, these devices are all going to be implantable.
Right. And by implanting them in us, it actually interferes with some of our natural abilities. Many humans have the capacity to be telepathic without any kind of mechanical enhancement, whatever. They have the capacity to do many different kinds of things. One example, a woman from China, she learned to, she studied Qigong in a very specialized way, and she worked for a certain learned school in China. And she was able to put a seed in the palm of her hand, and she did this over 100 times, and she could germinate that seed in 20 minutes to grow about 4 inches.
Wow.
And that's without any mechanical enhancement. Meaning we have codes in us that are very powerful, and there are things that want to control us. There's the whole theory of the archons or whatever, or
No,
aliens.
that's from the Gnostic tradition of
The Gnostic
Christian,
tradition.
the real
And-
ancient Christian Gnostics were in contact with these beings. I've just heard that word for the first time in the past 2 years, the archons.
Right.
Do you have any
Well, my
research
sense,
for that?
I've
Because
done
that's
some
new to me.
Well, with the archons want humans to be controllable. So
Oh. They're
actually,
not nice.
Yeah, but they also want transhumanism because then we're easier to control.
I see.
If they create half human, half mechanical, and souls are incarnated in it, then the soul is literally imprisoned in an inferior body
Right.
that it doesn't have access to all of its codes.
Mm.
The woman is an example who germinated a seed in her hand. She had access to other codes that were opening up, meaning we're huge libraries inside of us And when more higher vibrations go through, more things become available. And there's many thoughts that we have traces of a number of different races inside of us. And these potentials are sort of there. And the more energy flows through us, the more they relax and unwind. And as they unwind, we have access to more capacities or abilities.
You know, there's a couple of thoughts there. One is that, you know, there's this thing called junk DNA.
Right, they call it.
They call it junk DNA because they don't know what it is or what it does.
Yes.
We got a call coming in. And there's this one thought that DNA that they call junk DNA is actually another 10 strands. So that we're not just like the caduceus, we're not just 2 strands
Yes.
of DNA in the helix, right?
Yes.
But 12.
Yes.
And 10 of those strands have been attenuated so
Yes.
that we don't have access to telekinesis, telepathy,
Yes.
and a variety of, you know, perhaps astral, not just astral projection, but levitation and
Right. All of, yes.
teleportation and
Right.
and all of these things that might be considered angelic or magical in those realms.
Yes.
And the other thought that you're kind of eliciting from me
Yes.
is the idea of life force energy, which goes into that seed that I've encountered that story before, by the way. So yeah,
Okay, cool.
I can give you
Oh, that'd be
a
sweet.
verification that
That's wonderful.
I have either read or heard this story from somebody other than John. And so it's out there in the world that this
Yes.
woman had this chi,
Yes.
this energy
Yes.
that could, you know, sprout and grow a sprout from a seed. Now, that to me is a beautiful example of the human ability to not only emanate life energy,
Yes.
and this was identified by one of my big heroes, Dr. Wilhelm Reich.
Yes. Right. Oh,
And,
very much.
He's to me, you know, Dr. Wilhelm Reich far exceeds any current medical dogma or paradigm, because he studied this life force energy
Yes.
and came to areas of research that you would never imagine to being connected to this energy, which was from his clinical studies of human sex. Not sexuality, human sex, back in the 1920s,
Yes.
when communism was still alive in Germany. He was a devout communist in Germany at the time as a young man,
Yes.
and he was also a contemporary or protege of Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
And these two guys had a major falling out. In fact, they had a complete falling out
Yes.
because of a difference of opinion.
All
Now,
right.
in Dr. Wilhelm Reich's sex research, what he discovered is that when couples orgasm,
Yes.
this incredible energy is released into the ethers or the air,
Yes.
and phenomena could be measured from this.
Okay.
And
Yes.
in the clinical sense, the dials on his machines were going off the hook. Okay,
Wow.
so
Super.
he was measuring
Nice.
this
Nice.
incredible energy, which
Yes.
led him to keep studying that aspect. But the reason he was doing this study is because, as a devout communist and power to the working people and all this kind of thing, that philosophy
Yeah.
was a driving force for him to make happy working couples. And so he had this psychotherapy going on. I
Yeah.
suppose it was Freudian on some aspect of that. Freudian was that analysis,
Yeah.
psychoanalysis,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Psychoanalysis,
Right.
and so he was, you know, making happy couples.
Okay.
In the Communist Party were
Oh,
not
no.
happy
No,
couples.
No.
We
They won't pay attention to them
we
anymore.
want workers.
Yes,
We're not,
working, right.
the
Yes.
Communist Party was
None
so
of that.
upset
Sure.
that the workers were more concerned with their home lives and their
Yes.
wives and children's
Yes.
than being at the factory at the appointed time,
Yes.
you see. So this got him thrown out of the Communist Party, and he was a good communist, and
I'm sure.
it blew his mind.
Yes.
He couldn't understand it. And then, of course, as it started rolling into the 30s with the
Yeah.
rise of Hitler,
Yes.
he saw the writing on the wall, and he was being targeted because, again, the National Socialist, got to remember that word, party,
Right.
the Nazis, they weren't happy with happy couples either.
Right.
They wanted obedient.
Well, skipping back to the archons, which seems like a jump, but
No, go ahead.
the archons are energetic beings that need energy. This place is not, this dimension is not their home. And the only way they can survive in survival mode is to steal energy from humans.
Parasites.
And this is a super jump. When people wear insignias when they go into battle, that's actually marking them magically for sacrifice for the archons.
I've heard this before. Yeah.
So people think that they're all proud when actually they're running up to the cannibals, offering themselves up, and that a tremendous amount of energy is unleashed during a war in terms of terror and fear.
Adrenaline,
All of it.
anger.
Right, and they feed off of it.
Yeah.
So if you have happy couples, then they'll go, I don't want to go to war. Why? I want to sleep with Martha. I want to do this and that. Why do I want to go to war for? I'm happy. I want to be with my garden, with my children. No. Why? Meaning, you have to inject a lot of fear. Well, they're going to get us.
Yeah.
They're the enemy.
Well,
and that
that's
kind of thing.
There's this new word of bandying about that's been coined called cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Well, you are a
I was a psychiatric social worker, so I did a lot of psychological stuff.
A psychiatric social worker. That's hard
Yes.
for me to say.
Right. A lot of work.
So you have some background in the study in the science of the mind.
Yes.
And I encountered more than one Vietnam veteran over the years who had to really suffer with this idea of cognitive dissonance, and simply put is that the dogma and propaganda and the reality don't match. Okay, so your ideology and your training is confronted with a reality that does not jive. It doesn't make sense. And so what these guys were sharing with me, and it was a number of them over the years, is that what they found when they got to Vietnam after all of their training was a people who had absolutely one concern on their minds, and that was getting the rice planted on time, or harvesting the rubber on time, or any number of other activities, be it fishing or harvesting their gardens or whatever it was. Their day-to-day concerns of survival, which in a nature-based society, which the ancient Vietnamese are, and this is something I didn't know that these guys should. They said, did you know that the Vietnamese culture is among the oldest in the world, perhaps older than the Chinese culture, perhaps older than the Indian culture, and on contemporaneous with ancient Egypt. The Vietnamese, we know so little about. And their archaeological sites are very ancient, their culture is very ancient, their knowledge base is very ancient. And here, the American war machine comes in, and our guys are being told that they're liberating them from communism, they're whatever it is that they told them. And what they found is a very beautiful people that really just wanted to be left alone. And to me, it's almost like the Native American syndrome, where the Jesuits came in, and for the good of the Native American people, we're going to destroy their language and culture and their food supply so that they'll comply with the demands of the Lord and the
Right,
Bible,
yes.
and so on and so forth.
Right.
So there was this, then our guys come back to the States, and they were really deeply haunted by this, what they're told and then what they actually experienced.
Yes. It created a split in their thinking because they didn't have the skill set to sort it out. And then sometimes you have to forgive yourself because you killed all those people and you feel horrible about it.
Yeah.
So you're judging yourself. And you're judging yourself at the same time that you don't know how to get at it. So like there's a burr under your blanket. You did all these things and now you're back. It doesn't make any sense. It violates your entire value system from the time you were a day old.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a number of vets, and because I've worked with post-traumatic stress, I've been helpful.
Yeah.
Because I can look at their eyes and follow them and track them. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you're feeling this, okay, and then you do this, and then this, and this. And sort of like have them confront in a supportive way what happened and how to climb out of it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you have to acknowledge that you got run over by a truck. And it was a big butt truck. And that big butt truck was getting programmed to do something, and you were young.
Yep.
And you did a whole bunch of things that you feel completely horrified about, and you don't know how to get it out of your head. And one of the, for me, from my background, whatever, is for the person to, on a number of things. First, they have to forgive themselves for whatever they did, meaning they feel horrible about it. Come to terms with their anger toward the government and the authority figures, and acknowledge the fact that they were simply lied to, period. And most people can't handle being lied to. They're so addicted to the authority structure. They're like children who have an abused family. They're being in an abusive family. Mommy and daddy are doing terrible things, but they depend on mommy and daddy to feel safe. So even though mommy and daddy do these terrible things, and they do them on a regular basis, you can't question mommy and daddy, because if you question mommy and daddy, you're questioning your survival. So you be quiet, you roll up in a little ball, and you just kind of go your merry way.
John, can I interject?
Yes.
You just brought up something that I experienced as a 4-year-old, and that was experiencing mommy and daddy fighting.
Okay.
And I remember this so clearly. Dad had been retired. He was freshly recovering from experimental heart surgery from the heart attack that he had. And so since he was no longer active duty, he was making that transition from military life to civilian life.
Okay.
And he would play cards with the generals down in Trenton, which is a couple-hour drive from Rockland County.
Okay, so it gave him a chance to.
So
connect with them.
he would be
Right.
with his
Yeah.
milieu that he was accustomed to.
Right. Sure.
And he had at that point been a confirmed alcoholic.
Okay.
And I, didn't understand what that was as a child. But in any case, this one particular morning, Dad rolled in on a Sunday morning, and he had been out with the generals for probably a night too much. Maybe he went down Friday and stayed Saturday, and where the hell are you? And I can't have this kind of thing. And the dishes were breaking, and
Right.
I was watching this exchange between Mom and Dad. Dad, trying to calm the situation down as best as he could, but and when Mommy is in that state of mind, all the I'm sorries in the world aren't good enough. We're gonna have to break some dishes and make sure that Daddy understands that he's in the doghouse.
Sure.
Well, I'm a 4-year-old watching this exchange.
Yes.
Through the banister, and I run into my bedroom, and I climb onto my bed.
Yes.
And I'm in tears, and I'm going, God, what did I do?
Okay.
To make Mommy and Daddy fight?
Sure.
What did I do to make Mommy and Daddy fight? And,
sure.
And many, many years later, I shared this story, probably maybe at a 12-step meeting or something.
Yes.
And it was another person like yourself interested in psychology. It came out and said, you have no idea how natural and common that is.
Sure.
All children, when they first experience Mommy and Daddy having a fight like that,
yes,
have the same reaction. It's a visceral reaction. What did I do to make Mommy and Daddy fight? Because you're still young and formative.
Yes.
And you haven't disassociated from the world yet.
Right.
So you are part of whatever
Yes.
is going on in that
Yes,
moment.
you're part of that unit, so you can't separate it.
You can't separate it out.
So that when you try to get at it later, and when people are traumatized, they get back to that 4-year-old or pre-4-year-old level.
Yeah.
So when people are flooded or overwhelmed, like on the battlefield, they're like the 4-year-old. Or when 3 buildings go down, they're overwhelmed because 3 buildings go down and they don't know why, and they want a quick answer. And the quick answer was those terrible Arabs, which people don't understand that whole part of the world. So it's easy to identify them as like, well, yeah, they do terrible things. They probably did that. And the government uses that, and people feel safer now that we got them. So now they feel safer. When I first saw the bombing of Iraq, I didn't know what was going on. I said, great, they're bombing them, they did a terrible thing. Then I did a little research, and it was going, duh, duh, duh.
Yeah.
But at first I was buffaloed with everyone else. But when people every human on the face of the earth wants to feel safe. Everybody does. And it's fear. You want to survive. If your parents are fighting, your survival's at stake because so you don't want to die on a primal level. They're fighting. This threatens your security. You want to do something to make yourself feel secure again because you're tied into them. You don't have a separate system. You're working with their system. You're in their pattern. Well, a lot of the population is like a child. They are running off the circuit of identifying with the government as their authority figure, and they blindly listen to it. And no matter how much information you put in front of them, because they identify as children with this authority figure, they will just shut it out and they will not address it. It's more an act of immaturity and trauma and lack of emotional development that's allowing this to happen. Because if more people were more grounded and more secure inside of themselves and not in this crazy materialistic consumer culture, which sounds hackneyed and old and everything, but it has repercussions. If you're not grounded in who you are, and you're Nabisco cookie or the brand or this or that, then whatever happens, you're like a leaf blowing across the lawn. You don't have a reference point when you're looking at something, so you don't know what you're looking at. So if you see 3 buildings fall down in front of you, and the authority says that it was Cocoa Puffs, you'll say, well, it's Cocoa Puffs. Because you don't have an independent center that you're looking through.
Right. Unless you're a person like myself, and it's so funny, have you ever encountered Steve Romine's show, Truth 9/11, that he broadcast out of here?
Sure.
And, so I was on a radio show with him recently, and I'd been here with him on a show.
Yes.
And one of the conversations, my initial conversation, because we have a number of mutual friends that have been trying to get us together for a couple of years now, actually, and finally I've met him.
Yes.
And so he asked me, my thoughts were on 9/11, on the World Trade Centers. And I told him a quick little story. I said, well, I was building a stone wall in Connecticut for my then mom-in-law, and my stepson yells out the window, "Hey, Dad, a plane hit the World Trade Center." And I said, "Don't be messing with me." And he goes, "No, really." And I'm thinking to myself as I'm placing these rocks, little biplane, I'm thinking, some idiot pilot.
Sure, right. Some idiot
got
thing.
swept into these buildings by getting too close to an updraft or something. I was coming up with all kinds of ideas.
Yeah, yes.
And then he said, "Dad, and then Mom came in, Carol came in, and so he insisted we come up and watch the TV because it was going live on the news."
Right.
Well, we don't know if that was ever really live on the news, but we
No,
went up and watched it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Those of us who were
Afterwards,
studying
they had a lot of photoshopping.
So I'm watching, the one building smoldering,
Yes.
and then the supposed plane hit the other building.
Right.
And really trying to wrap my brain around this. It's like,
Yes.
wow, I mean, what is this all about? So
Right.
I continue watching. You know, I
Yes.
mean, it's kind of riveting. You know.
Oh,
but,
yeah, yeah. I was like, my God,
And
sure.
so I'm watching, and within 45 minutes, the second building to get hit falls directly down into its own footprint in a matter of seconds.
Yes.
Seconds.
Free fall.
Free fall. And
I was like, what the?
I'm looking at this, and it took me probably 15 seconds to turn to Carol and say, well, that was controlled demolition. And this
Yes.
is what this is the story I was telling Steve Romine.
Yes.
And his eyes got real big, and he goes, wow, you came to that conclusion that fast. And I said,
Yes.
well, yeah.
It looks like a duck.
Well,
sounds
yeah,
like
I
a
mean,
duck. Was,
I'm
yes,
in the
it
building.
wasn't-
I'm in the building trades. No,
Sure.
I'm not an architect. No, I'm not an engineer.
But you can,
But
you know.
I do like to read
Sure.
technical magazines
Well,
and stuff. And I was in
Yes.
rock and roll, and I did some
Right.
pyrotechnics. And when you read those kind of pyrotechnic
Oh,
magazines,
yeah, sure. You
you
get
know,
up on
you
it.
get into various forms of understanding explosives. And
Yes.
one of the things I was interested as a builder was you know, decommissioning buildings, or you know, taking things apart. And
Right.
it was just total random luck that a few months earlier I had read an article on how there's only 6 corporations on the planet that know how to take down superstructures in their own footprint
Wow.
that precisely.
Okay, sure.
So that's why it was
Very specialized.
very specialized, and I'm that's in my head. I watched these buildings go down. The second one to get hit, and then the first one that got hit, you know, follows suit.
Yes.
And I became a 9/11 activist that day.
Okay.
That day, I didn't need anybody to tell me
Sure.
that was a controlled demolition. And,
Right.
And,
Yeah,
and,
it's just
and as
right
as
in
the
front of your face.
as the unfolding scenario was fed to us through the media, that, you know, they found Muhammad Atta's, you know, undamaged passport.
Which only proved, which just simply proved that they were playing with us.
Well, it was
Yeah,
absolutely
it was pristine.
incredibly asinine to propel that into the consciousness of the public, because
They wanted to, they wanted to
you're gonna
believe
love the
it.
statistic that Steve shared with me the other
Yes.
day, and that is Steve asked me, he goes, well, you know, when you came to that conclusion, you know, how much of that building was left? And I said, well, I don't know, I'm going to give it 10%.
Yes,
That, you know, we're talking 110 stories of steel and concrete
right,
falling into its own footprint
right.
in seconds.
Yes. Free-
11 seconds? In 11
Wow.
seconds.
Wow. Yeah, it's
Wow.
like dropping an apple.
9/11, 11 seconds, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Nice how that
and
works out.
leaving, and I said, I'm gonna guess 10% of the building was left. So where did 90% of the building go? And then Steve goes, less than 1% of the building was left. It was all turned
It was turning into powder on the
into
way down.
powder.
Yeah, it was literally just
It
like a
was-
fine
it was,
dust.
You know, this, whatever it is that we saw going on, folks, it wasn't jet fuel.
They said that.
Okay?
it was-
Whatever it
yes.
was, we don't know what it was.
We don't, and they said there was even a possibility.
Mini nukes,
Mini nukes, 'cause
electromagnetic
they're-
directed weapons.
Yeah, they were using mini nukes in the Middle East right now, so they've had access to those for a while.
Yeah. This
Yes,
is
but the dust was so fine, you could see that it was disintegrating on the way down. Yes.
So, you know, to have the 9/11 truth movement, what are we, 15 years on now? Is
Yeah.
it 15 years from
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah,
September 11th,
yeah, that would be 15.
2001, right?
Yeah.
So 15 years on, and we are still seeing a growing number of architects, engineers for 9/11 Truth are now in the thousands. I think it's
Yeah.
something around 2,700 of them.
Yes.
I know that there are many groups around the country that are lay people as well as professionals. And then you have the lone wolves like myself that just instinctively know that this was
Right. But
a fabricated event.
But getting back to, people are given information that more than tells them 100 times that something isn't so. But emotionally, what is it? What did that character say? The truth, you can't handle the truth?
The truth, you can't handle the truth.
That
Right.
people
It's from
know the
X-Files.
truth cognitively. They
Right.
know it cognitively, but emotionally they can't. And one woman, one of the blogs, whatever, when she understood what happened in 9/11, she said she cried for 3 straight days because she understood that her whole world that she thought existed didn't. But she was having an honest emotional reaction.
An honest emotional reaction.
Meaning, I thought this was true. I know it's not. I'm crying because I acknowledge that it's not. Which was actually a sign of remarkable strength. Because she had the courage to go, I thought this was so. I found out with information it's not so. And I'm going to go, many people, I mean, I'm at Maria's and I say something about Hillary. Oh, she's a wonderful person. I know everything about her. What?
Yeah.
I know, I can't stop myself, but do you know that the Martian invasion, that movie where he goes, ack, 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 ack? They have like floating brains.
Yeah.
Well, they have Hillary with the head on.
Oh, no.
And she's going, ack, 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 ack. And they were like really bloodthirsty and everything. And she's like a warmonger, so it was just like so perfect. But our culture very often will pick up psychopaths, weave a cotton, sugary mask around them, get the masses to buy into the psychopath, and then they feel dissonance, meaning part of them knows they're being jerked around, but they've identified with it, so they can't let it go. So part of them knows that Hillary's whatever she is. I mean, I can't blame Hillary for being crazy. She's stark-raving chihuahuas. Psychopaths are born, they're not made. But the people who follow them are the problem. Meaning there's a handful of psychopaths at that level, but there's millions of people that follow them. The followers are the problem. Meaning you'll always have psychopaths with you, but you have to train the population not to follow them.
Well, now there's a concept there that you're really bringing to light, and that is training the population.
Yes.
And some of my children have been homeschooled,
Okay.
and the one that was homeschooled the most, really probably the only one that was truly homeschooled would be my son Cornelius.
Yes.
And he is incredibly erudite.
Okay.
Carol has him speaking a couple of languages.
Nice.
He's interested in a variety of intellectual pursuits.
Yes.
And this had always been a bone of contention with our school systems and the requirement for vaccinations. We elected not to vaccinate our son. I tried very hard to keep my twins from another marriage from being vaccinated.
Right.
And limited my eldest daughter from the needles.
Yeah.
Because it was such an atrocious number of vaccines that are going on with our children now. I think before they're 18 months old, we're talking 44 to 100 different vaccines.
They're flooding the system, and it's getting overwhelmed.
And so, there is a lot of public, authority figure pressure on so many fronts that our poor human population.
Well, the authority figures have been messing with us for a long time. When Lord Reif had machines that could cure cancer, tuberculosis, and a number of things, the government said you're not allowed to do this. Now, no one ever said, who gave you the right to say no? Americans have been goose-stepping for a long time.
You just brought something up. Now, in the closing moments here,
Yes,
we've only got a few minutes left.
Okay,
So
we'll
that
wrap
was
it
pretty
up.
good. We just killed an hour.
Yeah.
Pretty quick there, John.
Yes.
Authority and human rights All right, now I've made it pretty clear on my show here that my interest, as for a lot of reasons, has been Native American rights, but it's also rights for everybody. And one thing I want to share very quickly is my friend Donnie Sharrow. He was a radio personality for CKON radio at Akwesasne, Native American radio. And one night I came up into his house, and he was standing in front of his TV, gobsmacked, watching the Waco massacre go down.
Yes.
And I walked in the door. He didn't even look at me. He goes, "George." He just knew who it was me.
Sure.
We were playing guitars a lot those days together, and he's pointing at the TV, going, "See, they'll get anybody." And then he turns to me and he says, "We're all on the reservation now, George."
Well, that would be a great way to start or end the movie.
And that's the first time I heard that phrase, "We're all on the reservation now,"
Yes.
which I think has kind of been going on
Right.
up north quite a bit.
Sure.
And my
Yes.
life now has been impacted by, I hate to say this, but rotten people. Bad people do happen. And I'm a believer in the best in humanity, folks. I believe that we are amazing, that you all matter, everybody matters, and that you're, I got this from a great woman named Stella. We all come into this world with a spiritual contract to fulfill. And so you are powerful and you are amazing people, but you have to step up to it. You have to claim your power. But getting into my life, it has been impacted by the legal system, by the police, and by lawyers and judges and probation and all of this other thing. And in this situation that I'm contending with, I am being told by lawyers and public defenders that the truth doesn't matter, okay? And I am absolutely floored. I always suspected this because I never really encountered to have to deal with this kind of thing that I'm dealing with me and my partner. But I am seeing firsthand how our legal system, which has checks, balances, it has laws for just about every legal condition that you can imagine. There is remedies. And my partner and I are being told by our own attorney that there is no remedy and that the truth doesn't matter and that we have to follow a procedure and not the law, because the law is just, make-believe. And I want to tell you, folks, the law is the law. And I believe in the rule of law, and that we as a community are being violated locally right now for the last 10 months. And the unbelievable statements coming from legal professionals that the law is not about the truth. And to paraphrase them, it's not a quote, but cutting deals is. This is what it is. When you've been accused of a crime, people, it's not about whether you're innocent or guilty. It's about, are you more guilty or less guilty? Because it's already a given that you're guilty at least a little bit. See what I'm saying? So when you have been wronged with fraud and, let's just leave it at that, with fraud, because that covers a lot, lies, and then you are being told that the lies have more power than the truth. Talk about cognitive dissonance, folks. And we're going to have another show on this, as we are running out of time now. And I would like to just empower everybody that if you are dealing with a power structure that starts to tell you that the truth doesn't matter, immediately go into battle mode and start learning your rights. Johnny,
Always
John
a pleasure.
Covenant,
Always
you're
a
going to
pleasure,
come back
George.
and have another show with me?
Oh, absolutely.
That was
It's
a lot
fun.
of fun.
Oh, yes. We always have fun together,
And
George.
I'd like to thank Paula Gloria for her wonderful engineering again. And thank you all for watching, and I hope to continue bringing you interesting and thought-provocative shows. Thank you for watching The Conant Show.
Super. He can hold up his